For nearly a week, Lady Sansa's host travelled vigorously down the western road. Her guard was plenty in both numbers as well as experience. The king's own master of war, Howland Reed, played the part of Lady Sansa's personal escort. It would be customary for a member of the King's Guard to personally escort the wife of the Hand of the King, but the recent collapse of White Sword Tower had led to their ranks being stretched thin prior to their departure. Their trek had been uneventful thus far, but Sansa was aware of the inconvenience suffered by Joanna's travels west some months prior. Word was received from Casterly Rock that Joanna had been properly received by Lord Tyreek. Despite the efforts of the newly christened Lord of the Riverlands, Lord Brynden Tully, Lord Tyreek had personally ordered the arrest of Lord Brynden on a multitude of charges before Sansa had set off for the Rock. The reported death of Lord Brynden had given Sansa certain reassurances that her own travels west would be peaceful, a sentiment not shared by her husband, Lord Tyrion. The Hand had ordered all of his household guards, nearly 200 strong, to escort Lady Sansa all the way to Casterly Rock. In addition to these men, Lord Reed supposedly volunteered to command her guard. Lady Sansa would commonly refuse to ride in the Lannister carriage, too many negative memories of her childhood. As a young lady travelling down to King's Landing, Queen Cersei invited the young Lady Stark to ride with her through the Riverlands. That was before that evil queen ordered her own father to execute her direwolf lady. Despite Nymeria eventually ending the reign of that wretched queen, still Sansa felt ill when entering that golden carriage. Sansa's own curiosity got the better of her, as Lord Howland trotted his own horse close to hers.
Lord Reed, we've both occupied the capital for nearly a decade. Still, we rarely find ourselves occupying the same room.
That was not at all intentional, milady. A peacetime king such as His Grace rarely finds himself in need of a master of war.
Be that as it may, my lord, I find myself commonly surrounded by those who know nothing of my own family, my mother, and especially my dear father.
Sansa lamented as their horses' hooves pounded the western road in unison. Lord Howland drew a deep breath, knowing that his dearest friend and liege lord would be a topic of conversation.
My concern was that the loss of your son and heir prompted you to avoid House Stark entirely. If that was your intention, my lord, please know I would respect your wishes.
Rest assured, Lady Sansa, it is nothing of the sort. House Reed has always been known for keeping to themselves. Venturing out of the marshes for the rebellion was a once-in-a-century event. Years later, my son Jon knew the risks he was taking. I had to remind him myself.
Sansa hung on his every word, so much so her mare slightly stumbled as it veered delicately off the road. Sansa corrected its trek so subtly that Lord Howland did not seem to notice, and so he continued.
Jon himself broke the news to me of your father's unjustified death. I don't recall smiling for the next decade, a dreary existence for the father of 2 children. It wasn't until Mira returned from beyond the wall that I learned to laugh again.
No doubt the gods have failed to find favor on either of our houses, my lord.
Sansa finished to Lord Howland's stiff nod.
I never discussed the rebellion with mine own children. Did Lord Stark conduct himself similarly?
It was a rarity, to be sure, Lord Reed. But on that occasion, my Lord Father was always sure to reaffirm the fact that he owed you his life.
What Sansa assumed to be a compliment. Lord Reed seemed to scowl as if he had just packed a lipful of sour leaf. Sansa allowed the silence to ring in between them, knowing Lord Howland would respond when he was ready.
There were more battles than a Maester could count, milady. I'm sure Lord Stark saved my own life in return, many times over.
To be sure, my lord, but one incident in particular involved a fabled swordmaster, shadowed only by his sword itself.
Sansa inquired, and Lord Reed seemed to immediately take her meaning. Lord Howland now seemed even more uncomfortable, knowing he was invited to elaborate on this particular battle. Once Sansa had understood his reluctance, she then continued.
As a lady, we were always discouraged from inquiries of the brutality of war. A proper wife should always encourage calm and patience to a man's brutish nature. My mother used to say. That never slowed my brother's curiosity about the rebellion. especially Bran. He never missed an opportunity to ask father of the last battle in Dorne.
Sansa delicately suggested. She was quite proud of the subtle nature in mentioning this fulcrum of her father's backstory. It was a rare event when one of the Stark children were able to converse with a dear friend of their late father.
The odds were not in our favour, milady. Despite the fact the numbers were, it was not one of my more prideful moments, but still we survived the day.
Indeed you did, my lord. And now the greatest swordsman of a generation now lay beneath the dust.
In fact, he does, milady. To be honest, neither myself nor Ned expected to survive the battle. Ned agreed his sister's life hung in the balance, and he was ready to greet the gods for a chance to rescue her.
Howland offered. Sansa just met his eye as a silent suggestion for him to continue.
A veteran of countless battles, but there was something different about that afternoon. It was as if the gods themselves considered themselves our audience.
Howland trailed off. Sansa, knowing trauma herself, understood how difficult these memories were to revisit. Luckily for her, she had never been questioned about those events following her false wedding.
Once the sword of the morning fell, Ned made for the tower and I checked our host for survivors. Alas, I remained alone.
Lord Reed now had to correct his steed's course as his mind had wandered off the road.
Ned claimed Sir Arthur Dayne's sword before he sprinted off after Lyanna.
Forgive me, my lord, but this is where I find myself confused. My father never wielded nor boasted of his possession of Dorne.
A boast was the way of your Uncle Brandon, not of your father. It wouldn't surprise me if Ned kept the most notorious sword in all the kingdoms in some dusty bin underneath Winterfell.
Perhaps it was returned to House Dayne.
Sansa implied but immediately withdrew her suggestion as Lord Howland spat upon the ground.
Unlikely, milady. House Dayne always names the wielder of that sword. It is not inherited, but earned. Decades have passed without another named after the morning light. No, House Dayne is lacking their sword. I would bet my life on it.
Howland decreed, and Sansa knew her suggestions would no longer be received. She could tell Lord Howland was still visiting the tower as he continued to speak.
We often argued if it was Robert's revenge and Ned's war. Others argued the exact opposite. Both men wanted revenge, for Lord Rickard, Lord Brandon, as well as Lyanna's honour.
So you are unfamiliar with Dorne's location then?
Sansa inquired to Howland's deep belly laugh before he recovered in order to answer her.
I'd prefer to keep as many leagues between me and that cursed cosmic steel as possible. I have already felt its kiss, deep and sharp through my mail and across my chest. I'll carry that token until the day the gods call me home. Truth be told, milady, only your father knows Dorne's true location.
Howland recalled, and Sansa was ready to put this issue to rest. It was just another secret her mysterious father took to his early grave. The irony never fell silent on her that the house that took her father's head was now embroidered on her cloak, as well as her daughters and her sons. They were yet to reach the halfway point of their journey to Casterly Rock. It had been nearly 5 years since Sansa had travelled there to present her son as the heir to the rock. This visit would likely be less welcoming, but she felt confident in Joanna's ability to pacify Lord Tyreek until Sansa arrived.